Well, great to see you, or great for you to see me anyway. It's really great that we can continue to do this ministry and encourage your life and Christian growth, especially as we work through this really important topic this year. This year we're talking about the life you ordered, meaning do things that if you don't order your life, you end up getting a life that you didn't order, that you didn't put to order. You ever been to a restaurant and you ask for a meal and then you're surprised when something comes and then you say to the chef, this is not what I wanted, but if you read the description on the menu, you say, well, that's actually what you ordered, so this is what I brought you. And I think sometimes in our lives, we forget that the life that we are creating, the life that we are ordering and planning and disciplining, is the life that we ultimately get to live. And so it's really important for us to think through the choices that we make and look to God for His help so that we can live a life according to His plans and His ways through the power of the Lord Jesus Christ. And today I want to really focus on the noble life. I want to talk today about how do we live a life of noble intention, that we want to do and be good people. I don't think there's a child that's ever born that comes into the world that just thinks, I want to wreck things and ruin things and make everyone's life awful. In fact, you might even think some children think that, but they don't really. We all kind of want to be better. In fact, if you talk to people everywhere, and you can see by the songs that they sing and the movies that they watch or make, that they want to be better people. You know, there's this phrase that we now call the golden rule. Jesus never called it that, but it was a way that people now express what it means to be a good person. It comes from this teaching in Matthew chapter 7. It's all part of the great Sermon on the Mount, and we're going to be referring to other things from the Sermon on the Mount. But what Jesus said is something that's been picked up by people around the world, whether they're Christians or not. In fact, He said this, so whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. People have picked up on that and saw that as such an inspirational idea that you could, every person that Jesus is talking to, could actually change the world for better by simply doing the good that the world needs done. That rather than sitting on the sidelines and wondering what's wrong with this evil world, we can actually get ourselves involved and create something different. Notice how full of intention it is, that we are the ones that do it. And so people have grabbed this, whether they're Christians or non-Christians. In fact, you can find this kind of teaching in almost every kind of world religion. This idea that's just very simple, isn't it? We just have to be good to others. What's wrong with the world? Well, people aren't nice to people. So if we learn to be kind to others, everything will be better. If we don't judge other people, if we accept them, if we don't hurt other people. And I find this is very interesting for a world that claims to not have any moral compass, that they say that there's no real, rights and wrongs. Everybody agrees that good ought to be done and bad ought to be stopped. So we do believe in some kind of moral compass. And it seems to be from this statement that Jesus made, if you just read it out of its context, it sounds quite simple. Just do the good. That the thing that you want someone to do, if you want someone to help you, if your car's broken down, help people whose cars are broken down. If you want to be somebody who's understood, well, then try to understand other people. If you want to be somebody if you want to be somebody that's helped out when you're down, when you're, low on cash, then help other people out who are low on cash. It's like, you sow it, you reap it kind of stuff. And it's the world that you would like to live in, but you're the one that gets to do it. It's in your hands. The initiative is with you. That's why we're talking about the life you ordered, because if you don't kind of do these things, then the world doesn't end up getting better, does it? It just ends up with the same selfish people selfishly hoarding or selfishly working so their own selfish ends, and everything doesn't get better. But if we order our lives around this principle, do unto others as you would have them do to you, well, that's the initiative is there. It's with you. You are the one that can change the world. You are the one that can make things better. And Jesus, in the rest of this sermon, he actually talks several times about the things that for us feel like a lost initiative. That is, that we feel like the world is kind of too bad, or too many bad things are happening to us, and we're kind of out of control. Well, Jesus wants to put control back in our hands. In fact, he says things like this from Matthew chapter 5. He says, you've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But see, that's the thing. We we quest for justice, even though this command was given through Moses, to actually stop it being more. That is, like, instead of just being, well, you knocked out my tooth, I'm going to knock out 5 of your teeth. Like, people in the revenge cycles end up going for far more. So Moses' law was capped at equality, that if this happens to you, you can't go and do that and more to somebody else. But Jesus is going to turn the entire thing upside down, because what that command kind of reveals is that we feel a certain sense of obligation to return broken teeth for broken teeth, blinded eyes for blinded eyes. And we feel like there's no choice in the matter. We just react when people hurt us. And Jesus wants to say, your reaction is still in your control. So he says, I say to you, don't resist the one who is evil, but if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, well, let him have your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, just go 2 miles. Give to the one who begs from you. Don't refuse the one who wants to borrow from you. You see, in this time, the very specific examples that Jesus gave related to Roman occupiers, the people with the government, the military, and the power, oppressing the Jewish settler, the people who actually lived in the land, and they were taking advantage of them. So as you could have to be forced to carry a soldier's equipment for him for 1 mile, or the everyday experience of having people hurt you. And Jesus says, like, rather than feeling like you are obligated to return the same, you don't. You actually have a choice. And the only way that you are going to exercise that choice is by not reacting with revenge. You just turn the other cheek. Now, that's very hard to do, and anybody would know it. But Jesus says that's where your choice lies. And what he's saying is, I want to give you back the power to live. I want you to give you back the power to make your own choices. And you might think this in your own life. Listen to me. That you've experienced really hard and difficult things that are just unfair, things that were, it wasn't okay. I just want to say, it just wasn't okay. But what Jesus is saying is, you still have a choice about whether you repeat those things. One time when I was new to pastoral ministry and struggling with the different things and the pressures and the responsibilities of that, and I ended up having a chat with a pastor about it. And he told me that when he was a young pastor, there was another pastor older than him that he looked up to who lived just down the road from him. And he said the entire time that they lived close quarters like that older pastor never once visited him to encourage him. And he was using that as a kind of way of saying to me, don't expect people to encourage you. You've got to learn to survive on your own. And he was repeating the same behavior of that person who did it to him. And I thought, but you don't have to repeat what he did to you in ignoring your needs. You actually can proactively go out there and seek people who are struggling. You don't have to do what you experienced. Like, if you experience unkindness or unfairness or lack of love or coldness or, all of these things that happen in a broken world, we still have a choice, Jesus is saying. And I know it's hard, but we don't have to react to what's happened to us. We can instead live an ordered life where we choose to do good. And that's why Romans chapter 12 kind of talks about this in the sense that when we do good, that's the only way that we actually undo evil. For example, context is the same. It's about revenge. Romans chapter 12, verses 19 to 21. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by doing so, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And this phrase, don't heap burning coals on his head, if you're thinking, yeah, I'd love to dump a bucket of fire on that mean person, that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about bringing coals from your fire to somebody else so that they can have what they need. And he's talking about don't revenge yourself. But he gives this little wonderful phrase at the end. He says, don't be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And that's what Jesus is saying. If you're trying to stop evil, it doesn't get solved by more evil. The reaction of eye for eye, tooth for tooth doesn't solve problems. It just ends up with a bunch of blind people who have no teeth. So there's got to be a better way. We overcome evil with doing good. We are the change. I think one of the people who was really inspired by this idea that you don't do what other people are doing as a way of balance the equation. You don't solve unfairness by being unfair. You don't, if people hurt you, you don't hurt them back because it doesn't solve anything. One person who was really inspired by that was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, he was convinced from the scriptures that Jesus' way of transforming culture was to, in a sense, sow the thing that you want things to be. So he told all of his followers, when we go on marches, even if they hit us and hurt us, we never respond that way. If they hurt us, we just accept the hurt. If they hit us on one cheek, we turn the other. Because he recognized that way of responding with kindness or with forgiveness is the only way for the community essentially to heal, because somebody has to sow some forgiveness. Somebody has to sow some kindness for people to recognize that their animosity and their hatreds and their fears are irrational and they need to move on from them. But that's not going to happen when people are in a fight. Somebody has to calm down and be nice. And so he taught his followers, very different from someone else, a contemporary, Malcolm X, who taught people to be, if it's violence to you, then it's violence back to them. And then there was lots of people around that time that, Black Panthers and people were saying, these white people are hurting us, we got to fight back and blow things up. And Martin Luther King Jr. was like, no, that will just make the fight deeper. You don't solve evil with evil, you solve it with good. And that's where we're at. But evil, Jesus wants to teach us. The reason that we respond with good is because evil is actually a lot trickier than we think that it is. It's got a sneaky way of replicating itself. And when you get involved with evil in any way, it has a way of kind of internally corrupting you. And so Jesus has several cautions here from the Sermon on the Mount. We just read one, but there's another where here in Matthew chapter 5, verse 37, where he says, talking about oaths, let what you say be simply yes or no, and anything more comes from evil. So Jesus is making us aware that it's this weird vanity of our hearts coming from an evil place that makes us boast and say things that we're not going to do, and rather than gain authenticity for us, it loses authenticity. So don't go past just yes or no. Don't swear about anything. Just say what you really mean, because that tendency towards evil is always there. And then again, what we read in Matthew 39, he says, I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. If he slaps on the right cheek, turn to him the other. So he's saying, when there's this evil happening, to work in a resistance to it actually inflates it. If evil is coming, if evil is part of the world, of the experiences that you've had, the family unit, the workplace, the school friends, whatever evil is there, if you kind of, stand up, I'm going to create a barrier and I'm going to fight back against it. If you do that, you don't make evil less, you make it more. And that's why Jesus is saying to us, this evil stuff is actually quite tricky. So, evil is contagious. It kind of leaps from one, like in the old days when they built houses too close together in a city, and if one of them caught fire, well, it would just jump house to house to house to house. And evil's like that. It can start in your grandfather's generation and then burn generations down after that. It just weirdly transmits because it's so easy. It's dry kindling. The brokenness of our world is dry kindling for evil. But evil in Greek is the word poneros, which means painful or hurtful. So rather than it be something like sort of super corrupt, like some evil genius type person that's completely mad, evil is not like that. Evil is the response that brings more pain, the response that brings more hurt, the way of living that hurts other people. And that's why God is so much against it, which is why in his command, like Jesus said, he said, whatever you wish that others do to you, do that to them, because this is the law and the prophets. You see, this is why God put these commands in there, is because he knew our capacity to cause hurt and pain. And then, what do they say? Hurt people hurt people. So he's saying, somebody's got to stop that. So here's my commands. My commands are, do the good the world needs. Do the good your neighbor needs. Don't revenge yourself. Don't reply with evil. And that's what all of the commands are about, is stopping pain, bringing the trouble down, stopping people from hurting one another. Thou shalt not steal, says both the person who is stealing and the person who is stolen from, because the evil goes and it transmits to the other person. The anger, the revenge, the plotting, the scheming, the worry, the fear, it burns and burns and burns. And Jesus says the commands of God are there to stop the fire. Like he says here in Galatians chapter 5, when Paul is summarizing the commandments, it's almost the exact same idea. It really is. He says, for the whole law is fulfilled in one word, and then he gives 7, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you are not consumed by one another. You see the same sense? He's saying all of the commands that God has given us is to make us good neighbors. It's to be that neighbor that everybody would love to be with and share life with. But the problem is that we keep snapping and biting and eating, consuming, and the problem is every bite you take out of somebody else, all you do is cause them or bring about them biting something out of you. So we have to switch it up. We have to reverse it. We have to do the good. Now, I want to bring you to the last caution, because I think this is the one that has the most amount of power to help us change. In Matthew chapter 7, verse 12, we're going to read this again for probably the third time in this message. Whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Now, what verse comes next? It's something to think about. But I was kind of surprised about it. In fact, when I was reading through the Beatitudes again, I was just on my holiday, and I took the chance to just study through the first half of the book of Matthew several times. And as I was reading this section and I got to this verse, I thought, wow, that's such a well-known verse. But I was upset by the titling around it, because it said the golden rule, and then there was 3 verses total, and the last 2 verses didn't seem to fit with this verse. And I thought, hang on a second, what's going on? So here's a bit of surprise. The next verses that come after this are this: enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. Now, when I first read those things, be really nice, be good to people, do the good that you want done to you, this is what the law and the prophets are all about. And then Jesus sounds like he kind of goes into this sort of side issue of look out for, how you live. Don't take that broad road that leads to destruction. Make sure you take the narrow road. Here in this translation, I'm using the English Standard Version. They translate the words, narrow and stuff. They sort of describe difficulty about that. They talk about one way being easy and the other one being hard. It's not there in the original Greek, but it's part of the message. It's part of the idea that there is an easy way, the easy option that just comes to you, but then there's this other way that's hard and difficult. So I want to talk about that. You see, what Jesus is really saying is the initiative is yours. You can be the good. You can do it. You can live the noble life, but it requires a very hard choice. It requires a difficult choice. The word for narrow means restricted, in a sense that it pressures in on you. It becomes hard because it's hard to get through it. It's also the word for persecution. It's the word for trouble. In a sense that the narrow choice is actually a way that really brings a lot of struggle, and it's not going to be easy to take that route. So if you've got all of these people dreaming about, hey, I'm going to be a good neighbor, I'm going to do all these good things, Jesus is saying that choice is harder than you think it is. So you better be aware of that. It's so easy to not do that, and it's so hard to do it. So evil, pain, hurt, retaliation, hate, lust, ego, all the things Jesus talked about in the Sermon on the Mount, These are breaking of God's commands. They are wide open. They're so easy. It takes absolutely no effort to fall into. It's like it's easy as just falling out of bed, people say. You don't have to have a class in it. You don't have to study hard. You don't have to resist anything. You just have to go for it. So it's all right there. Selfishness, self-interest, lust, desire, passion, pride, it's all there. It's all so easy. The other way is very hard. So Jesus breaks it down essentially into two decisions. There is the gate and the way. In both things, talking about the broad road, he talks about the gate to the broad road, and then he talks about the broad way. Then he talks about the gate to the narrow way, and the narrow way. It's two things. So the gate is the entry, the beginning, the seed. It's the immediate choice that you make in that moment. And then there's the way. It's the journey. It's the struggle. It's the burden. It's the learning. There's two things that happen in the choices that we make in life. There's the initial thought, the desire, the hope, the dream, the belief, the response. Those things are the gate. And you step into those and you are on a road. But then there's the road, the actual way. And that's actually much, much longer. It's not the reactions anymore. It's the deliberation after that. It's the consequences. It's what happens later on. And what people don't realize is that there is a gate to evil and a way of evil. And for example, Jesus talks in this passage on the Sermon on the Mount, just give a couple of big illustrations. One is the gate of revenge, where Jesus says, don't take revenge on people because it's like, it's a gate. They hit you on that cheek. Whoa, get ready for my walloping, it's coming. But he said, that's just the instant. What about the way? You see, once you get into a life of reacting to evil, you live a life of judgment. You live a life of deciding who's worth it and who's not worth it. Is this nice person to that nice person? No, that person's bad. This really. And you live in a world of judgment. Now, here's the thing. If you're walking through a road, a life of judgment, you feel judged all of the time because that's your method, that's your way, that's the way you're living. So if you get into revenge, if you pay back anybody, you end up walking a life journey that's full of payback. And it's just painful. So it's there and it's easy and it'll just keep repeating itself over and over and over and over. Jesus says that's the gate and that's the way. So there's another one he gives, the gate of adultery. Now he talks about specifically saying that this idea that adultery is just something that you physically do, he says it's far, far deeper in your heart than that. It's when you first look lustfully at a woman. Equally so for women to look lustfully at a man. He says, but that's just the gate. That's just the way into it. It starts you down a life of sensuality where everything becomes about your desires and your passions and your feelings being satisfied. It could be extended out into a lot more commands because all kinds of envy and all kinds of idolatry and all kinds of desiring other things, coveting other things is part of the same idea that you open the gate and then you walk in that way. And there's nothing to stop you. It just keeps going. Evil is tricky. So I'll just give you a couple of examples about how cultures around the world have tried to solve this. I'll show you a picture of these women who are wearing burqas. In some places of the world, women cover up their entire bodies. So that's the way to try to stop adultery. That's a way to stop lust. And it's probably pretty effective. If you never have a tempting vision pass by you, the thought of lust doesn't occur to you if you didn't have the evil in your heart already, which is another subject. But then the same people who want to live a great moral life around lust and sexuality, they also have a very strong code of revenge and of doing unto the other as they've done to you, the jihadi thinking. So this one culture that lives pure sexually lives with an open gate and an open way towards revenge, honor crimes, offenses against your dignity. They are always returned in full force. So one seems to be good, but then falls over on the other side. But let's switch it back. Maybe your culture is more like this, that women's bodies are put on parade. In fact, so many women, their dress sense just seems to come out of revealing their body rather than trying to cover it. It's like a lust machine, and maybe that's what's desired. I don't know. But in our culture, or the Western culture, we just say, let's just throw it all out there and everyone has to make their own choices. But then when it comes to anger and revenge, well, we dial that down. We don't do that at all. We go, if you feel like you've got a anger issue, well, you need anger management classes. You need to see somebody. You need to talk to somebody, because that is going to hurt everybody. So isn't it interesting the way that people try to solve these things? And that's why I think the most important part of this teaching is not that we can ourselves either walk in the right way, choose the right course, or stay on that course, my friends, without Jesus Christ in the center of your life. If you want to live a noble life, a good life, you cannot do that without Jesus Christ. And again, through Jesus' teaching, he will show that he is the gate. He is the gateway to a love life connection with God. That only through Jesus Christ do you ever have a relationship with the Father. You can practice religion, that's different. But actually knowing God, having Jesus Christ live in you, to have the seed of his goodness live in you, if you make that choice, it will be difficult. Absolutely. It's a narrow, narrow gate. There is only one person at that gate. It's Jesus. And you must go through Jesus. It's narrow. And it'll rip you apart if your pride and vanity think that you're the good person. No. You've got to humble yourself. You've got to come to Jesus as a sinner and say, Jesus, I am desperate for your life. I can't live a good life. I'm not a good person. It's very narrowing, and it'll close itself in on you, and you'll get persecuted for choosing Jesus. But it's the only gate that will lead you to life. But then there is also the way of Jesus, and many of the people who are probably listening to me right now, you've walked in the gate of Jesus. You've chosen him. He's the narrow way of salvation. But there's the way of Jesus. And those desires, those loves, the way that you are excited to love God and respond to him, that you may have lost his way. And if you don't live Jesus' way, then you're not going to see the fruit of it. And that way is also narrow and difficult. So Jesus Christ, knowing that people were going to come to him and say, just save me, save me, save me. Sure, he'll be your Savior, but he's got to guide you through the rest of your life. You have to stay close to him, and he taught so frequently about that. So my friends, as we finish today, choose, if you want to live a noble life, I want to encourage you in this, choose Jesus. Stay close to Jesus. Love Jesus. Get to know Jesus. Jesus is the face and the love of God to you. He's how you know the Father. Have him. If you've not received Christ, open up your heart to him and pray. Pray and say, God, I'm sorry for my sins, and I recognize that I'm actually broken and I can't fix myself. So please, Jesus, come into my life and save me. I believe that you died on the cross and rose from the grave so that I could be given new life. And so I open myself up to you. Pray that with your whole heart today and receive Jesus. And if you've received Jesus, can I remind you, the noble way is living like Jesus. Selfless, loving, caring, to give up of yourself, to let other people take from you, to love the unlovely, to love the broken, to love your neighbor as yourself, to stay on that very difficult and self-sacrificing road, because that's the way of Jesus, and it's also narrow, but it's worth the journey, because you are the person that will change the world if you walk in the gate of Jesus and you follow the way of Jesus. And I want to thank you for joining me today, and I pray that this message will help you and encourage you to love Jesus and to follow him. God bless.